Today, something important happened, and most people didn't notice it, not because it was hidden, but because it looked routine. I'm Emily Carter, a U.S. political and global affairs analyst, breaking down how power moves beyond the headlines. Over the past few weeks, immigration enforcement has quietly moved back into focus, not because the law changed overnight, but because how it's being applied has shifted. Across several states, civil rights organizations and immigration attorneys have reported an increase in at-home enforcement encounters involving ICE. On the surface, these moments don't look dramatic. No sirens, no headlines, no public confrontation, just a knock, a conversation, a few questions, and that's exactly why they matter. According to legal experts, many of these encounters don't turn on force. They turn on consent. ICE operates under different kinds of authority: administrative authority and judicial authority. On paper, the difference is clear. In real life, especially early in the morning, inside someone's home, under pressure, it often isn't. What civil liberties groups point out is that a large number of detentions begin with small, ordinary decisions: a door opening, an answer given, a document signed, nothing that feels dramatic in the moment. But once those steps happen, the legal situation changes, sometimes permanently. This is not about panic, and it's not about assuming wrongdoing. It's about understanding how institutional power actually works in quiet, procedural moments. Because when one side knows the rules inside and out, and the other doesn't, outcomes are decided very quickly. That imbalance between institutional knowledge and individual awareness is where most of this story really lives. And once you see that, you start to understand why these encounters matter far beyond any single case. To understand why these encounters matter, you have to zoom out, because this isn't about one agency, and it isn't about one policy. It's about how immigration enforcement is structured in the United States. ICE operates under the Department of Homeland Security. Its authority comes from federal law, but that authority isn't unlimited. There's a difference between what officers are allowed to ask and what they're allowed to do. According to immigration attorneys, most enforcement actions fall into two categories: administrative actions and judicial actions. That distinction sounds technical, but it's critical. Administrative authority allows ICE to question, investigate, and initiate immigration proceedings. Judicial authority involves courts, judges, formal warrants. On paper, those lines are very clear. In practice, they blur, especially in situations where people are under stress, inside their homes, trying to make sense of what's happening in real time. Civil liberties groups say this is where power quietly shifts, not through force, but through procedure. ICE officers are trained to move cases forward efficiently. That doesn't mean wrongdoing. It means the system rewards speed, compliance, and clear documentation. For individuals on the other side, the experience is very different. They're not thinking in legal categories. They're thinking about family, work, kids in the next room. So small decisions get made quickly. And once those decisions are made, they're hard to undo. This is why legal experts emphasize that immigration enforcement often isn't decided in courtrooms first. It's decided in moments like these. Before a lawyer is involved, before a judge ever sees the case, that gap between institutional process and individual understanding is not accidental. It's built into how the system functions. And once you recognize that, the conversation changes, because this stops being about blame and starts being about structure. Which brings us to the bigger question: what does this mean for rights, accountability, and public trust when enforcement increasingly happens in quiet, private spaces? That's where this story goes next. What's happening now is no longer just a legal question. It's becoming a public conversation, because when enforcement moves into private spaces, homes, early mornings, quiet neighborhoods, people start asking broader questions, not just about immigration, but about power. According to civil rights organizations, the increase in at-home ICE encounters has triggered a rise in community reporting. Not protests, not headlines, but people talking to each other, comparing experiences, sharing what happened and what didn't. That's how awareness spreads. And once awareness spreads, institutions respond. Local governments have begun issuing guidance to residents. Legal aid organizations have expanded hotlines and clinics. And immigration attorneys report a noticeable increase in consultations from people who were never politically active before. What's important here is not fear, it's visibility. Systems like this tend to function most smoothly when they remain invisible. When encounters feel isolated, when people assume their experience is unique. But once patterns emerge, the conversation changes. This is also where politics enters the picture. Elected officials are now being asked how much discretion enforcement agencies should have, and how much oversight is appropriate when federal authority intersects with private life. Some argue this is simply the law being enforced. Others argue the location and timing of enforcement carry consequences that go beyond legality. Both views exist simultaneously, and that tension is exactly what analysts are watching. So here's the question I want to put to you. Do you think immigration enforcement should primarily operate through quiet procedural encounters? Or should there be clearer public boundaries around when and how that power is exercised? Share your thoughts in the comments, because how the public answers that question will shape what comes next, far more than any single policy memo. At this point, it's worth stepping back, because what we're talking about isn't just immigration enforcement, it's how power is exercised in everyday life. Systems like this rarely announce themselves. They don't arrive with speeches or policy rollouts. They show up quietly through procedure, through routine, and over time, those routines become normalized. Supporters of current enforcement practices argue that the law is being applied as written, that agencies are doing their jobs, and that consistency is necessary for any system to function. Critics don't always dispute the law itself. They question how and where it's enforced. They ask whether actions taken in private spaces, especially early in the morning, inside people's homes, carry social and ethical consequences that go beyond legality. Both perspectives exist, and both are shaping the debate. What's clear is this: when enforcement becomes quieter, more procedural, and more decentralized, accountability becomes harder to see. Oversight shifts from public institutions to individual awareness, and that puts a lot of weight on people understanding systems that were never designed to be intuitive. That's the broader pattern here. Not chaos, not conspiracy, but a gradual expansion of authority through normal processes. And once those processes are in place, they tend to persist. This is why stories like this matter, not because of fear, but because of precedent. Because how power is used today sets expectations for tomorrow. If stories like this matter to you, and you want calm, clear analysis that explains how institutions operate beyond the headlines, make sure you subscribe to the channel. It helps these conversations reach the people who need them, and it lets me know to keep going deeper.